Hello and welcome back to Bookish. This week, in lieu of a Saturday Hodgepodge video, I am filming a response to Steve Donoghue's response to my video, 10 Tips for BookTube Watchers. Ordinarily, when Steve makes a response to my videos, we exchange, clever, or maybe not in my case, my end, so clever comments in the comment section, maybe a Voxer message, and we move on. But, in this case, I have to admit that despite Steve and I's friendship, I was really irritated by his response video for a number of reasons. But the primary reason is that he completely misrepresented what my video was about and what my content was about. At one point in his video, and I'll leave a link to his video down below, he says that my video here, my 10 reasons or 10 tips for BookTube watchers, is a quasi-response to his video about 10 tips for booktubers. It is not. It is clearly, if you watch my video, it is clearly me responding to a commenter on my channel who, basically said someone should make a video called 10 Tips for BookTube Watchers. I got the title directly from that comment. And then I organized my video around the questions that commenter asked. Why are these milestones so important? Why do people say things like watch, subscribe, or like, comment, subscribe, sorry. Why do people say those things? And then the commenter said, and what can BookTube watchers do to help BookTube channels and BookTube creators they like? That's what my video is about. Now, I know the title is confusing because it just says 10 tips for BookTube watchers, but the very first thing I talk about in my video is that it's really about things that BookTube watchers can do to help BookTube channels that they'd like to help, and that's what it's about. This is not an attempt in any way for me to tell BookTube watchers what they have to do, or to make them feel like they're bad BookTube watchers if they don't. Again, the premise, which is clearly stated, in which I repeat over and over again in my video, is that these are things you could do if you want to help BookTube channels and BookTube creators that you care about, that you like, that you want to support, in addition to answering questions that they may have. Now, one of the objections that has come up is that by showing, my behind-the-scenes, BookTube stats and BookTube analytics, that I was, kind of suggesting that every BookTuber should pay a lot of attention to their analytics. Well, that's not what the video is about. I was showing analytics and all the information we get, or have access to, I should say, as BookTube creators, as a way of kind of answering that question. Why do some people, not me, say like, comment, subscribe? Why are milestones so important? And it has to do with the fact that we do see numbers all the time. Now, this is the first place where, Steve had something to kind of say, I think, about BookTube numbers, which, to me feels like one of those things where Steve has an agenda, has things he wants to say, and regardless of what my video is actually about, he's going to say them. So I'm going to show a clip of Steve talking about subscribers here over my left shoulder, and then I want to respond to that.
So let's go over Brian's tips for BookTube watching. I'll leave a link to his video down below, and he prefaces by saying that YouTube throws numbers in the faces of content creators all the time. I couldn't help but chuckle when I heard that line right at the beginning of his video, because most of the stuff that he shows of the background in YouTube Studio in his video is stuff I've never seen before and would have no idea how to find. I've made more videos than anybody, and YouTube does not constantly throw numbers in my face. You have to care about it to care about it. And TLDR, spoiler warning, you shouldn't care about it. But I just wanted to sort of qualify that just a little. If anybody is going to notice that YouTube throws numbers in your faces all the time, it's going to be me. And as I've said in response to videos that make similar points to this in the past, I don't see that, and I don't care to see that.
So Steve makes, I think, a pretty good point here, where, in my video I make it seem like all these numbers are thrown at us. He's right. If you never click on YouTube Studio, you never see all the numbers I showed. But Steve sees his numbers. Steve sees his sub numbers, he sees his watch numbers, his view numbers. You can't help but see those numbers. Those numbers are there. So, on the most basic level, in terms of subscribers and views, those are numbers you see automatically. You can see those numbers on our channel unless we take those numbers off our channel. So, yes, you can avoid seeing those numbers by not clicking on YouTube Studio, all those numbers I showed you, but not clicking on YouTube Studio. But you can't avoid seeing your subscriber numbers. And then Steve goes on in this clip to talk about things having to do with subscriber numbers. So let's watch this one. By the way, I'm watching on my computer down here.
For smaller channels where you're wondering, like Brian points out, if you're howling into the void, watching that number go up can really mean something. And a subscription doesn't cost you anything. It doesn't cost you much in the way of attention or effort or anything like that. After a certain point, I think booktubers tend to focus too much on it. I know of some booktubers who pay attention to their subscriber count, whether it fluctuates hour by hour, day by day. Even one subscriber.
So I found this clip interesting when paired with the first clip. First of all, Steve says he doesn't have these numbers thrown in his face, so he doesn't know anything about them or even how to access them. And he seems to be kind of elevating that ignorance about YouTube numbers and analytics as though it's a virtue, that it's a virtuous thing not to know these things. And he kind of doubles down on that here by talking about how people pay too much attention to their subscriber numbers. Steve is aware of his subscriber numbers. He hosts Q&A videos every time he reaches another subscriber milestone. So it feels a little bit disingenuous to me for him to talk about other people paying too much attention to subscriber numbers when, clearly Steve pays attention to subscriber numbers. But, those are kind of just minor differences, and maybe they're just semantic differences about how we look at these things. But beyond that, the reason why I showed all that information was to answer Kelly's question for why some booktubers, and maybe I should have been more clear that it wasn't all booktubers, but why some booktubers talk about subscriber numbers and encourage people to subscribe, or talk about, like, comment, and subscribe, and those kind of things, because those are things that we see. That is information that we have access to and we can see. And you can be, obviously, in Steve's case, a perfectly successful booktuber without looking at that stuff. But, Steve sees his numbers, and Steve responds to those numbers in the same way the rest of us do. So the rest of the video really is Steve not so much talking about, what my tips are, but Steve kind of railing against the idea of people using their BookTube channel to make money. And Steve is passionately against monetizing. So, let me play a clip for you here where he encourages you not to monetize your channel.
Number 7 for Brian deals with monetization. Now, Brian and I don't agree on the subject of monetizing your BookTube videos. And unlike on many other subjects where we disagree, where it's a huge amount of even give and take, on this subject, Brian is simply wrong. He is trying to defend mindless greed because, again, social media in the 21st century has so normalized mindless, across-the-board greed that it seems a little bit weird that it even needs defending. It is indefensible. Greed at all is indefensible, but mindless greed for pennies is completely indefensible. You should not monetize your BookTube channel. In his video, Brian goes out of his way to show you that it makes him no money at all. Basically no money at all. Couch cushion money. He does it anyway. He does it anyway. Don't do it. Not just because it's extremely obnoxious, not just because if you monetize your channel, you're going to start to care about monetization. Do you want to be that person? You don't want to be that person. But you will automatically start to care about it if you do it and make it an active element of your BookTube channel, not only for those 2 reasons, but also for the 3rd reason, which is that's what you'll reduce it to. If you monetize your channel, you will reduce it to monetization. Brian talks in his own video about videos of his that perform well or perform poorly. And I've heard that from other booktubers too, who are making pennies a year. These are personal interactions. These are conversations. Do you look back at the end of a week and say, well, some of my conversations with friends this week performed better than others? No, you don't. And if you did, you would rightfully be a Patrick Bateman-style ghoul. So don't do it. Don't do the behavior that will reduce you to that level. Do not monetize your channel. Don't enter money into this equation, especially when the impulse is revealed to be so degrading because it's not any money. It's a tiny amount of money. Don't do it. You are degrading yourself for no reason. It is absolutely no justification to say, well, if YouTube's going to monetize my channel anyway, I might as well do it. As my Saint Ma used to say, if your friend jumped off the Brooklyn Bridge, would you jump too?
Okay, so there are several things here that kind of pause made me laugh. Number one, I think it's interesting that Steve blames social media for creating the concept of mindless greed. You know, social media didn't exist back in the 80s. I'm pretty sure there was a lot of mindless greed going on back in the 80s. The other thing I find interesting here is that Steve seems to indicate that the problem with monetizing your channel is that you're not making enough money, and therefore because you're not making enough money, you're degrading yourself by monetizing your channel. This seems to imply that if I were making more money from my BookTube channel, that I would not be degrading myself, that there's some line in Steve's mind where earning money means if you earn enough, it's not degrading, and if you earn less, then it is degrading. Additionally, you know, I'm really uncomfortable, obviously Steve isn't, I'm uncomfortable telling people how little money they should worry about or how much money they should worry about. He refers to the amount of money and specifically he's talking about me, even though he knows good and well what I do with my money, assuming he believes me. He talks about this as being couch cushion money, as being pennies. Now I've revealed on another video, and I'll tell you here, that the annual amount of money I make from YouTube is between $400 and $500. It's gone up a little bit recently, but that's about the amount of money I make. Now, it's entirely possible that to Steve, $400 to $500 extra a year is inconsequential. You know, for me, what I do with the money involved means that it doesn't go to support my income. But $400 to $500 a year is hardly couch cushion money. If you have friends who come over to your house and annually drop $400 or $500 into the cushions of your couch, invite those friends over more often. If you regularly drop $400 to $500 worth of money into your couch when you sit on your couch, please come visit me. Because, you know, to me, that amount of money is not inconsequential. That's money that I can use for a purpose that I find rewarding. That's money that lots of people could use to upgrade their YouTube equipment, to go on trips. And, you know, if we're going to put this in perspective of how much money that is, you know, that $400 to $500 is about what somebody can earn in 2 weeks working a minimum wage job. That $400 to $500 from my family would buy my family groceries for about 3 weeks. That hardly seems inconsequential, that if I chose to use it for that purpose, that I could. That $400 to $500 could probably pay my cell phone bill for a while. It might help me pay for my Wi-Fi. You know, that to Steve, this amount of money is inconsequential, and therefore it's degrading to monetize my channel. To make this kind of money, you know, kind of smacks of elitism. And him telling you that you're greedy for wanting to make that money for whatever purpose you want to use, you know, is one of those things that just inherently makes me uncomfortable. And part of the reason why it makes me uncomfortable is that it reminds me of something a student said to me a long time ago. Sorry, I had a student who was really disrespectful. And, you know, we were talking about why he disrespected his teachers, and he said, I don't respect anybody who works for so little money. In his mind, the amount of money we made was a valuation of us as human beings. And there's some hints of this here, you know, that Steve is saying that, you know, I'm greedy and degrading myself for, you know, monetizing my channel to get that $400 to $500 a year. That's pretty uncomfortable. Now, I don't believe that Steve is elitist. I think there's something else at work here. For Steve, and since Steve, you know, oftentimes believes he can look into the hearts and minds of others, let me do that for Steve in terms of Steve here as well. And I'll play the next clip and go on and talk about this.
Tip number 8 is, well, nothing could be as bad as making one of your tips for being a better BookTube viewer watch one of my commercials. Nothing could be worse than that. for its Borg-like collective degradation. Nothing could be worse than that. But tip number 8 is pretty bad. I didn't know about it until I watched Brian's video. In the row of actions underneath every video that you watch, one of those actions is thanks, and it has a little dollar sign, little coins. And I guess that means that you can use that button to simply give someone money. You can give the YouTuber money right then and there while you're watching their video. So not a question of any kind of GoFundMe or anything like that, or buy me a coffee or one of those ads, but simply you can click on it and financially reward the BookTuber. I didn't know that existed, and I wish that it did.
Okay, so a couple things here. First, I think in the beginning of this clip, you see Steve kind of really reveal what he's on about, and that is just that Steve just hates the advertisements. He hates having to watch the advertisements, and he hates it so much that he's willing to construct this whole argument about how, I'm degrading, or people who monetize their channels are degrading themselves for what he sees as an inconsequential amount of money, and he's willing to risk sounding like an elitist just because he hates these advertisements that are on our channel so much. But did you notice he also mischaracterized what my video is about? Here again, he says that my video is about making better BookTube viewers. It is not. As I explained at the beginning of this video, and I explained at the beginning of my original video, the purpose of the video was to give BookTube viewers ways they could help BookTubers, BookTube creators that they like, things they could do to help, and the whole video is framed that way. I never suggested everyone should do these. I never suggested it's an obligation. I never suggested that you would be a better BookTube viewer for doing it. These are things you could do, and I phrased it this way over and over again in my original video. These are things you can do to help booktubers that you want to help. If you don't want to help, you don't have to do any of them, and you're still a great booktuber. Okay, never said anything else. I've never said anything different than that. But I find it interesting here that Steve is against the thanks button. He just thinks that's a bad idea. And I find it interesting, that Steve in his earlier clip, talked about how bad it was to introduce money into this conversation type relationship that he believes that we all have. And the reason why I find those things interesting has to do with the next clip I have from Steve's video.
This brings us to tip number 9, which is to join a Patreon. A lot of booktubers set up a Patreon. I have one myself. I laughed when I watched this tip on Brian's video because he mentions that on Patreon you get specialized content, previews of videos before non-patrons get them, or videos that are only for Patreon subscribers, that sort of thing. Of course, I have a Patreon that is despised and neglected, and I don't have any specialized content in there. On the introductory video that's on my Patreon, I mock the whole idea of Patreon and suggest that the higher up in the subscriber tiers you go, the more psychotherapy you obviously need. And yet, some of you are kind enough to subscribe to my Patreon. That is wonderful of you. It's really great. I console myself that the few people who've subscribed to my Patreon did it with their eyes wide open.
Okay, so, I think this is interesting. Steve has a Patreon. By the way, if you don't know, Patreon is a service where you subscribe to somebody's Patreon channel, and theoretically they make content that only goes on Patreon, and you pay for that subscription. So usually that subscription is monthly. So I find it interesting that Steve has a Patreon channel, which he lists, and he says in his own video, which he lists in every video description box that he puts out. Every video he puts out, he lists the link to his Patreon account in a subscription box, and it says, fund me by going to Patreon, my Patreon account. It seems interesting that he has this Patreon account after having railed against the idea of introducing money into our BookTube community, because Patreon is a way in which Steve makes money. Now, he tries to justify this by saying, oh well, my Patreon is ironic, and later on I think he says the only reason I made it was because some other people took some time and effort to put together my Patreon introductory video, and that's the only reason I have it. Well, that's interesting to me, that Steve makes money through his YouTube account by attracting customers for his Patreon, which pays him money. Now, is this less degrading for Steve to do because he makes more money? in his Patreon account that I make, or other people here make through their YouTube ad accounts. This seems to be kind of an interesting ethical conundrum, and I'm not suggesting that Steve is a hypocrite. What I'm suggesting is that Steve just really hates advertising. And he really doesn't want to have to watch ads, which is fine. You know, you're certainly entitled to have your opinion. You're certainly entitled to skip through ads on my video or anybody else's video where they're where they exist. You are perfectly within your rights, and I completely support your ability and your choice to unsubscribe and not follow channels who have monetized and have ads on the channel. But to make these ads evil and to suggest that these ads are an example of greed when you think other ways of making money through your YouTube channel are not examples of greed. I mean, you know, he talks about this being kind of like the anti-Patreon account, but you know, that Patreon account makes him money. He thanks his people who foolishly, as he points out, support him through Patreon. You know, is he cashing the Patreon checks, ironically? Anyway, so, you know, to me it just seems like that Steve hates ads. And in looking at comments on Steve's video, which I'm responding to here, and some of the comments on some of the other responses, it just seems to be that people hate advertising. They don't want advertising in BookTube. They don't want to have to watch the ads. They don't want to have to skip the ads. They don't want to have to mute the ads. They don't want to see ads. They want to be able to come to YouTube and spend hours every day getting absolutely free entertainment from a multi-billion-dollar corporation that makes its money from ads. They believe they're entitled to watch YouTube videos for free, and that if you know, dare to monetize your channel, that you are, you know, interrupting their right, their privilege to watch YouTube videos for free. And you know, no such privilege exists. And to suggest that, you know, we should keep BookTube, or our part of BookTube, free from advertising when we can't do that anyway, that we should keep BookTube free from advertising just because people want to be able to watch hours of BookTube for free with no advertising. By the way, watching the advertisement doesn't cost you anything but a few seconds of your time. Feel free to invest in ad blockers and mute the ads, to have YouTube Premium, whatever you want to do. You know, just be aware that you're giving money to somebody when you do that. But, you know, to suggest that this is, you know, introducing, you know, evil into our perfect little utopian paradise here in our corner of BookTube is, to me, just the height of silliness. To assume that you have the right and that to, you know, demand that people not monetize their channels because you don't want to watch advertising is just the height, to me, of ridiculousness. Another thing that kind of comes up in these videos in response to what people said is, people say things like, you know, it's not your obligation. Steve says it at some point in his video. It's not your obligation to feed the YouTube algorithm. You know, it's well and good, and you can position yourself as, you know, as though you are above all these kind of concerns about numbers and the algorithm and making money through your YouTube channel. You want to, that's fine. And I know there are some people who for whom that's actually true. But you need to be aware that if you're on YouTube, if you're watching YouTube, if you're making content, you are working for YouTube. You are. Every video you watch feeds the algorithm. Every comment you leave feeds the algorithm. Every video I make feeds the algorithm. You cannot be on YouTube without feeding the algorithm. And all my videos suggest is not that you feed the algorithm for the sake of feeding the algorithm. All my videos suggested was that if you want to help booktubers who you like, if you're a viewer, a watcher of BookTube, and you don't make videos of your own, that if you want to help booktubers that you like, one of the things you can do for booktubers who are monetized, and one of the things you can do to help grow a BookTube channel, is to watch the whole video, to subscribe, to comment, to like, because those things will be rewarded by the algorithm. And the booktuber you like channel will grow simply because more people do that. You know, the idea that you can be above the algorithm and have a YouTube channel is just patently ridiculous. I didn't get to 3,600 or so subscribers via word of mouth through the comment section. Okay, I got there because the YouTube algorithm sometimes recommends my videos. People click on them and they watch them, and some of them think, I like that content, I'm going to subscribe. Steve Donoghue did not get to 13,000 subscribers just through word of mouth. The YouTube algorithm rewards his videos because they get lots of views and he has lots of subs. You can say that you don't care. You can say that ignorance of all the numbers and things like that is a virtue, but you are being rewarded by the YouTube algorithm. To me, that whole idea that, don't feed the algorithm, the only way not to feed the algorithm is not to be on YouTube. So in closing, let me just remind you that my video was not intended to make you feel guilty as a BookTube watcher. And looking at the comments on that video, where lots of BookTube watchers who are not content creators, were made some great comments on that video. I don't think most of the BookTube watchers that watched the video took any exception to it. Maybe some did and leave the comments. That's fine. I understand. But it seemed like it was something people were interested in knowing in different ways they could help BookTube channels that they like. And that's all the video was about. It wasn't about trying to make watchers better watchers. It wasn't about feeding the algorithm. It wasn't about, encouraging people to monetize. It wasn't about encouraging greed on YouTube. It was about things you could do to help booktubers. And if that means you want to see your favorite BookTube channels grow, then you're going to do that by watching, by subbing, by commenting, by liking, by sharing videos. Because like it or not, all of our channels grow, and our growth is dependent on the algorithm. And that's all I was talking about. Anyway, there you go. I look forward to your response in the comment section below, and as always, thank you for watching.